Welcome to another episode of Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, we'll be discussing the anti-Islam claims that Islam needs reformation. Yes, the think tanks such as Ayaan Ali Hirsi, Majid Nawaz, and all of these secular think tanks like Sam Harris, they all are preaching that Islam needs reformation. And it's not just them. You can go to all Islamophobes, all people who critique Islam, all people such as the bloggers on YouTube, Facebook, on Twitter. They all are calling for the reformation of Islam. And what they mean by reformation is pretty condescending. The definition of reformation that they want to sell Muslims is basically to be a non-Muslim. Yes, you are only a reformed Muslim if you're a Muslim like Majid Nawaz, or if you're a Muslim like Rita Panahi, who writes at the Herald Sun and is a columnist. She's basically the definition of a non-Muslim. Yes, non-religious, non-practicing. This is their definition of being a reformed Muslim. Yes, you need to give up the Quran. Everything in the Quran is metaphorical. None of the verses are literal, such as Sharia. This is backwards. It's something that must only exist in the 1400 years ago, and it's not an Islam that should exist in our modern age. So this is their definition of reforming Islam, believe it or not. It's not to say that you could live by the Quran, but you must only be a peaceful Muslim. No. This is not their definition of reformation. Their definition of reformation is to completely get rid of Sharia law in our modern age. In even Muslim countries, forget about being it imposed on non-Muslim countries. In Muslim countries, Muslims should remove the law of Sharia, which is God's law, out of the religious system. That's their definition of Islam being reformed, believe it or not. It's more like the Christian faith. The Christian faith invented this idea that they shouldn't be following the biblical laws, even though the Ten Commandments are usually found in the Constitution, and even secular Western Constitution follows the tradition of the church and the tradition of the Bible when it comes to the Ten Commandments. So even though our laws are based on Judeo-Christian laws, our secular systems, right, they still reject verses of the Bible to not bring it into the Constitution. So they'll do a separation between the church and the state. So they successfully did this with Christianity. They removed the laws of God. It's interesting because Christians have actually conceded to this, but it's interesting because whenever an abortion clinic is built and babies are being killed, the Christians are protesting against those abortion clinics. So notice when the Christians are not happy with Caesar taking the law into his own hands, then the Christians want to impose the biblical laws upon secular society by getting these abortion clinics shut down, which is interesting. It actually shows the hypocrisy of even Christians who have actually believed in Christianity being reformed, yet when it's reformed, they then have a problem with it. Amazing. They actually got sucked into it, and now when these abortion clinics are put up, they are unhappy. So that's your fault. That's your fault for letting secularism rule upon your Bible. So that's exactly what they want to do with Islam. They want to bring Islam into reformation by bowing their heads down to secular think tank and their mentality and their interpretation of the Quran, and they want to then legislate over the Quran and then remove the Quran altogether, so that Muslims can only practice certain aspects of the Quran However, if you practice, things like Sharia law, then you are not a Muslim. That is not the proper Islam. You need to be reformed, and Reformation comes from a secular, liberalistic interpretation. So that's what I have learned after discussing with Islamophobes of their concept of Reformation. So don't be fooled. When the Islamophobe comes to you and says, we need to tackle extremism, we need to reform Islam, this is what they mean by the definition of Reformation. For you to literally become a non-Muslim and a sellout, and to become someone like Majid Nawaz or Rita Panahi or even Sheikh Tawhidi, who is from South Australia in Australia, coming out and shaking hands with Pauline Hanson. This is what they want. This is the Muslim that they basically want. And they do this under cover of, we need to de-radicalize Muslims. We need to de-radicalize the book that they follow, because the book that they follow is a violent book. But you see, we believe as Muslims, to tackle radicalization and extremism, we don't say that the Quran is a violent book. What we say is that the extremists and the radicals misinterpret the Quran. So the Quran doesn't need reformation, it needs restoration to how the scholars actually understood that book to be. A consensus, and not just one single scholar, a consensus of scholars, how they understood it. And that is not to kill through terrorism, not to kill people by putting on a suicide vest and walking into a marketplace and blowing yourself. That is not in the Quran. And in fact, when they misinterpret the Quran and try and justify certain verses, we have restored it by restoration. In fact, there is no such thing as restoration too, because the book has already been in detail written through interpretation. It's already there. You just need to go out and look at the facts of what the scholars have written on certain verses of the Quran, and you will see that even people such as Brother Kerim, and I'll put a hyperlink below this video, you will see that the verses of the Quran that have been presented to be violent have been refuted due to being taken out of context, manipulated, such as some of the violent verses in the Quran, as they claim, like Surah 9:5. It says, go and kill the infidels wherever you find them. Some of those verses, Surah 9:9 and so forth. But when you look at the context, you see that it is about peace. It's about those who are trying to fight against you. It's in the context of war and so forth. It's not just to go out and kill infidels wherever you find them. So all of this work has already been done. I can put a hyperlink below this video. Every single verses of the Quran that have been presented as violence by the Islamophobes and the radicals, and notice the Islamophobes and the radicals have something in common. As Mahdi Hassan said in the United Kingdom in his debate, defending Islam is a peaceful religion, he says there is something common between the Islamophobes and the radicals. They both interpret the Quran the same way, you see. So what we need to do is to say restore Islam, is to tell them that what the true interpretation of those verses are. And that's what we need to do. But you see, the Islamophobes and the radical extremists don't want you to do that, because when those radicals and extremists come from countries such as Iraq and Syria, they have been bombarded and they have been the victims of war. And what happens is, when you're the victims of war, you then create your own gangs through the invasion of Iraq, right? When America first went in there after the fake weapons of mass destruction killed entire almost civilizations, and through this obviously you're going to have gangs that will emerge, and these gangs will then try and justify them being Muslim, because I don't want to lose credit amongst the Muslim community. So they justify themselves to be Muslims, and to justify their barbaric acts because of desperation, they go out and commit acts of terror. And of course, they would use the Quran to misinterpret, to justify what they're doing is really true, and they're not infidels and apostates, and they're not these, fake Muslims. So this is one extreme. And this is why it led them to the misinterpretation of the verse of the Quran. But you see, even the Islamophobes have been preaching that Islam is a barbaric and a violent religion for decades. So it was easy for them now to also use ISIS and all these radical groups as a justification to prove that, hey, look, the extremists, the radicals, they're true, they're right about the Quran. So yes, now the Quran needs reformation. It needs to be changed. These violent verses need to be thrown out. It's all metaphorical and it doesn't mean what it is. Instead, what they should say is, no, the radicals are wrong, the moderate Muslims are right, and the Quran is moderate religion. And that Quran has had its verses misinterpreted. Can you imagine if I misinterpreted the Bible and used violent verses to justify actions? People can do that. But you see, the Christian will say, no, that's a misinterpretation of the verse. So why does the double standards change when it comes to Islam? And it's interesting, I've actually even heard some Islamophobes say, Islam doesn't need reformation. It's an extremist religion. You can't change it. The Quran is an extreme, violent book. You can't change it. So you even have some Islamophobes who even argue with other Islamophobes about needing reformation. Now, don't you find that quite laughable? So don't get sucked in, folks. When they mean reformation, they want a Muslim to be like Rita Panahi, Majid Nawaz, people like Sheikh Tawhidi from South Australia. And it's interesting, when you go to people like Rita Panahi or Majid Nawaz, they'll say, we're not really religious people, right? Because Majid Nawaz was caught in a strip club with another woman and he was trying to claim Islam needs reformation. And he was trying to present himself as the perfect example, a true Muslim. This is how a Muslim has to be. And he got caught with a stripper in a club while he was engaged to his fiancée. And what happened? He came out publicly and he said, oh, I'm not a religious person. Don't look at me as an example. Yet before that, he was presenting himself as an example for the ummah of how a Muslim should be, a reformed Muslim like him, right? So basically, their definition is you need to be basically a non-Muslim. They won't tell you you have to be a non-Muslim, but basically that's what they're insinuating. That, yeah, you can keep your Muslim name. You can, maybe you could keep your Muslim dress if you're lucky, right? But don't bring us any Islamic laws here. Don't live by the Islamic laws of the Quran even in your personal life. No, don't do that, okay? Because if you do, you're an extremist Muslim. If you want to eat by halal, you're an extremist Muslim. If you want to wear the hijab and the veil, you're an extremist Muslim. You need reformation. If you think that fornicators need to be punished, you're an extremist Muslim. Yes, you're not a moderate Muslim. Under Sharia law, that is a radical Islam. So notice, it's not about terrorism anymore. Even the aspects of punishment on certain moral issues, you need to be reformed and you're an extremist Muslim. Oh, Muslim men don't shake hands? Muslim men don't... Are you serious? Muslim men don't shake hands with Muslim women or non-Muslim women? Oh, how disrespectful. Islam needs to reform. You need to change Islam. That hadith is crap. You need to change Islam. It needs to be reformed. You need to shake the hand of a non-Muslim. Yes, that is basically what they're trying to do. They're trying to change their religion, you see. So it's not really about extremism anymore. It's about reforming and changing the whole religion. Oh, you Muslims don't say you're an Australian first. You say you're Muslim first. How dare you? How dare you not say you're an Australian first and Muslim second? How dare you not say that? Why do you Muslims say you're Muslim first and Australian second? You see how they want to put country and state before Islam. This is their definition of trying to reform you. to make your religion come anything but in first position. Oh, you Muslims have capital punishment. You shoot, under Sharia law, people who traffic drugs, like in Indonesia, you shoot them. No, you can't do that type of capital punishment. See, Islam needs to reform. Yet, in the Western Hemisphere, you have capital punishment. If anyone tries to become a national threat to security, they do capital punishment. You die, yeah? They send you a drone strike. Or if someone was to become an enemy to the state, or if someone did a horrendous crime, such as he was a serial killer, they'll give you the electric chair, or they'll give you euthanasia, a lethal injection into the arm. So they kill their criminals. It becomes okay. You know, secularism doesn't need to be reformed, but Islam, for imposing capital punishment, yes, that needs to be reformed. That needs to change. That is an extremist element of Islam. So they protect the criminals, but these same Westerners actually cry because their own rules and regulations are too lenient. You know, the man goes and rapes a girl, multiple girls, he only gets 9 years in prison and is out in 7 years, out on parole, right? Out on bail. And look what happens. He goes out and reoffends, and the Australian say, oh, we need to toughen up our laws. So they have problems in their own systems, and then they want to point a finger at Islam and Muslims and upon their society when their own failed society has become bankrupt and their criminality has gone up and it's on the decrease, not increase. And then they have a go at Islam and Muslims. Islamic society is barbaric and it needs reformation. Oh, Islamic society has cases of rape. Oh, Islam goes to Europe and we have cases of rape. Yet in their own hemisphere, you have epidemic cases of rape. In America, every 6 seconds, a woman is being raped. Can you believe this? Every 6 to 9 seconds, this is what's happening in America. And then they want to pick a finger at Islam. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Islam needs reformation because it actually has killed people, especially a lot of people, apparently, in the last 20 years. But notice that the actions that have committed by terrorists and terrorism, I'm not justifying it, because whenever you speak about the elephant in the room, they say, oh, you're justifying it. You are a person that is sympathizing with terrorists. No, I'm not. Islam isn't about terrorism, and extremism and radicalization has no place in Islam. You can't put a suicide jacket on, walk into a marketplace and blow yourself up, killing men, women and children. This is wrong and against Islam. But notice that the killings that are taking place, as the FBI records tell us, and the think tanks, is against Western imperialism, trying to enlighten the Muslim world, trying to change the Muslim world, trying to come to the Muslim world and trying to impact it through secularism, trying to reform it by changing its Islam, going into Afghanistan and getting rid of Islamic schools and trying to introduce Western schools and policies where men and women intermingle one another, and they try and bring their secular think tanks into those countries. They did that with Turkey in 1923 with the declaration and agreement with Atatürk. They did that now with Afghanistan and got rid of what they saw was the extreme elements of Islam and Muslims at the time. In fact, they actually defended the Taliban to fight against Russia, but then when they claimed that the Taliban struck them back through Osama bin Laden, they then went after Osama bin Laden. So they go after Afghanistan, not only to go after bin Laden, right? Fine, you want to get rid of bin Laden? Do it. Get rid of the extreme version of Muslim. Get rid of him, fine. But you're not just there to get rid of bin Laden. You're still there occupying it and trying to change it to completely secular mentality. That's your definition of trying to reform Muslim countries. And you tried to do that in Iraq. You sent even Christians there to evangelize that land. And we see it. The documentaries are all out. In fact, I'll post a hyperlink below this today and you can see it for yourself. So not only did they go into Iraq, kill and massacre its people, after the fake weapons of mass destruction, they went in there to try and reform and change Islam, get rid of any Sunni leader or any Sunni impact, get rid of him and put something that is un-Islamic into that system, and then try and run that country. And of course, what happens, the backlash, you'll have extremism come out to fight against the oppressors. Yes, what they are doing in the name of Islam is not right by committing terrorism. I agree to that. But this is the effects. Violence begets violence. Wrongdoing begets wrongdoing. When the West commit wrongs, you'll have Muslim fractions who are committing wrongs. And then when you say, oh, look, Islam is a violent religion. Look at Islam, it's showing to be violence, yet they don't blame the Western imperialists who are going out and infiltrating and creating these terrorist cells to begin with. And that's why America feels shamed. It's going into Iraq to try and clean what the Bush administration did. And it's backfired. It's spread to Syria and it's spread to all over the places. So it is Western imperialism that is causing division in those lands. And then when terrorism happens and when all of these backlashes of criminality happen, they say, oh, look, Islam needs reformation. You see, what we were saying about Islam being a radical religion has been proven true. Notice how Allah says in the Quran, they act like they are the peacemakers, but in reality, they are the ones who cause mischief. And then they say Islam needs reformation when it's their secular systems that need to stick their heads out of Muslim countries, and it's their evil, corrupt, aggressive mentality that needs reformation, not Islam. Thank you.